Okay, back to Revelation chapter 16. And look, it says they gathered together into Armageddon. Remember I told you they're coming to fight God, the one that can, with just one word, change the ocean. The armies think they're going to fight God. I wrote down, life without Jesus is as futile as Armageddon's war against God. They don't even stand a chance. By the time we get to chapter 19, which we'll get to later, Jesus comes down on that horse as the word of God, and it says a sword comes from his mouth and kills all of them instantly. The sword of his mouth is his word. He just speaks a word and they die. It's futile to resist God. But now let's talk about Armageddon. How does Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Daniel 11 fit with what we just read? Okay, let me give you a quick prophecy seminar. Number one, God has staked his name on Israel. Hosea 5:15, he calls Jerusalem my city. One of your theological terms, do you remember what God's immutability is? He doesn't what? Change. Yeah, he's changeless. If Jerusalem is my city, with Hosea, 2,600, 2,700, 2,800 years ago, it still is. So God, and by the way, in Jeremiah 31, I will gather them, and Zechariah, he says the whole world's going to come against him and I'll defend him. God has staked his name on Israel. So what's going to happen in the future? Well, the tribulation, right where we are now in chapter 16, is when all the nations of earth turn against the Jews, God calls them my people, and Jerusalem, God calls it my city. And look what happens. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against the nations as when he fights on the day of battle. And in that day, his feet will stand. See, the real battle, there's no battle at Armageddon. It's called the Battle of Armageddon. There's no battle there. Jesus goes by, speaks a word, and the entire gathered army falls dead. The real battle is here. His feet stands on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem in Zechariah 14. It's really graphic. Do you know what it says in Zechariah 14? It says all the armies are watching him land, and as they watch him land, it says their tongues dissolve in their mouths. So they can't speak. They're dying, by the way. It's a description of what a neutron bomb does to organic life. Neutron bombs don't blow things up, they just incinerate water-based biological organisms, life. Their eyes melt in their sockets, Zechariah says. That's the second coming of Christ. He incinerates the enemies. Amazing. So, that's what we would call World War III. It's God's wrath, it's Israel's future, and it's Armageddon. The big question is, when is it? Well, we know when Jesus returns with his second coming. We know the Battle of Armageddon is there, but guess what? Armageddon is chapter 16 of Revelation. What is this? This is chapters 38 and 39 of Ezekiel. Where is that? How about, where is the Psalm 83 battle that I'm going to show you? Well, Daniel tells us the whole tribulation is only 1 week long. It's the 70th week. At the middle of the week, the abomination that causes desolation, that's when the Antichrist puts up the image of himself. Then it issues into the Great Tribulation. That's ended by the second coming of Christ, and the millennium starts. We know that the temple is standing by the midpoint. We don't know when it gets built. So there's a lot of interesting things. You know, here is Daniel's time. There's the ministry of Christ, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, the destruction of Jerusalem. This is the church age. And this is the rapture. Do any of these battles take place before the rapture? Which, by the way, the conclusion of all this is life without Jesus is fear and dread. I mean, all these people trying to fight against God and coming in Revelation 16. But let me just show you. We only have 12 minutes. This is from Bloomberg. Do you know what Bloomberg is? It's the premier business news for all the business people. If you have anybody in your family that's in business, they know Bloomberg. Ezekiel 38 describes the Middle East. This is Bloomberg's chart of it. Russia and the end of days. Here's Russia. All the green ones are allied with Russia. You know, Russia's helping Iran. Iran's helping Russia. You know, Iran's selling them drones to bomb Ukraine. Russia helps Syria. Russia now is big in Iraq. Russia has bases in Lebanon. Russia is helping Yemen. But on the other side, now this was 2 months ago in Bloomberg. It's changed completely in 2 months. Because Saudi Arabia was totally opposed to Iran. And Saudi Arabia was opposed to Yemen. In fact, Saudi Arabia is fighting in Yemen against Iran. But all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, Saudi Arabia said, oh, we're not at war with Iran anymore. What? And what's fascinating is the U.S.'s sphere of influence. See, right now, the red ones are our friends, and the green ones are the ones that are against us. And it just was really interesting. What's happened? Well, slowly the U.S. is starting to slip. You know, we have a board member at Word of Life Board that is a retired Air Force, and I always, every board meeting, twice a year, I always ask him, I say, how's the America doing weapon-wise? He said, it's classified, I can't tell you. And I said, okay. But I always ask him anyway. Do you know what he's working on? This. This is our hypersonic missile that still doesn't work. The Russian one works. The Chinese one works. Did you know this hypersonic, you know what hypersonic is? They go at speeds of rockets like 25,000 miles an hour. China launched theirs from the Gobi Desert. It went up, it circled the Earth 3 times, and it came down and hit its target. And America went, oh, it works. We've already seen Russia's, so China's works really well. China beat everybody. Russia's works really well. They're using it in the Ukraine for target practice. I mean, a hypersonic missile is like overkill. It's like attacking an ant, you know, a little ant pile with your, you know, big, huge M80 or something, or M60, I mean, the biggest rifle. So what happens to America? Have you ever asked that? Have you ever wondered that? Does the Bible say anything about it? Well, basically, we can, yeah, the Bible does say a lot about it. Not America, it's not. I've never seen America in the Scriptures, but I have seen the future in the Scriptures. And if America survives, we're going to have to align with part of the Antichrist revived Roman Empire of the West. What does that mean? Well, we are a colony. America was a colony of what? Britain. And what was Britain? Britain was the last piece of the old Roman Empire that has ruled the world. In fact, Britain ruled more of the world than anybody else, ever in history. The combined area under colonial rule of Britain was the largest empire the world's ever seen, and we were a piece of that. And so was Canada and Australia, and so was India, and so was Egypt, and so was China. In fact, there are only about 14 countries that England didn't invade. And they're in the very center of Africa and the very center of Asia, and they got everybody else, said they were amazing. So maybe we align with the Antichrist revived Roman Empire, or we implode. That's the news right now, isn't it? We have debt more than all the rest of the world combined. How do you like that? We are more in debt than all the rest of the world put together. All the banks, all the loans of all the other countries our national debt is like, well, it's $32 trillion debt bomb. And if we implode financially, probably we'll break into smaller groups of states. You know what makes us strong? We're called the what states? Yeah. What about when we get ununited? It would be awful, because the way we have military bases spread all over the 50 states, but when it starts crumbling, it's not going to be unified. And also, you know, some states are big in some products and some are in others, and so we don't have any boundaries. We just ship it all like this. In fact, Los Angeles, everything in Los Angeles comes in by truck. I don't think anything is from Los Angeles. It all comes in by armies of trucks every night, just supply everything. What happens when those trucks can't come, you know, from Iowa and Georgia, from the poultry farms? What's going to happen? So we would implode and not be powerful anymore. Or we explode. Russia every week threatens America with atomic weapons. Every week. That's unprecedented. Putin just put his newest submarine that has a missile that explodes multi-megaton 100 miles offshore, where anybody can be with their missiles underwater. and it makes a tidal wave that would inundate 50 miles inland. Do you know how many million people live within 50 miles of the coast? I mean, like almost everybody in Florida. How far is Hudson, I wonder, from, Newport Richey, from the coast? A tidal wave, they say, a missile of that size, like 20 megatons. Do you know how tall that tidal wave would be? Do you know how far it would go? So it could be we explode when Russia stops threatening us and actually launches 2 to 4 of those Sarmat missiles, which are hypersonic. Remember, they go 9 times faster than a rifle bullet. It's unbelievable how fast they travel. Or we fade out. I mean, even North Korea could turn off all of our lights. If they just took a container ship and had one of their Scud missiles in there with a small nuclear explosion on the top, they put it up to 100 miles and blow it up there, it would wipe out all of our power grid in the whole blast radius. And there are certain points in America, there are only like 2 or 3 spots you need to hit with one of those Scuds, and it would turn off all of our lights, it would fry your iPhone. So either we align, or we implode, or we explode, or we fade out, or we dry out. I mean, what do you think ruined Mesa Verde and all the other rock-dwelling peoples of Native Americans? It was the mega drought. They had a mega drought 1,200 years ago. It wiped all of those tribes out that were building all those amazing structures, and it looks like it's going to wipe us out. But what does Ezekiel 38 talk about? It says that the armies of the north, and it names the region of Scythia. That's a biblical group. The Scythians were from right here. And that is what we would call modern-day Russia. Then it names all of these armies of the east, specifically Iran, specifically Libya it talks about, and Ethiopia, and all of this. And that's what Ezekiel 38 and 39 is. God said that's coming. We just don't know when. Psalm 83 is a different group. Moab, that's where the Palestinians and central Jordanians are. The Hagarenes, Psalm 83 talks about, that's Egypt. Hagar was from Egypt. Gebal, that's Hezbollah and the northern Lebanese. Ammon, those are the Palestinians and northern Jordanians. Amalek are the Arabs of the Sinai area. Philistia is where Hamas is, if you know anything about current problems. Tyre is actually a city controlled by Hezbollah. And Assyria, ancient, is where the Syrians today are and northern Iraqis. By the way, the groups mentioned in Psalm 83 are not historically at the same time. They were not extant. They were not living simultaneously. They're from about 1,000 years of history. This group has never lived together, but Psalm 83 said these geographic areas, in other words, those people, all simultaneously attack Israel. Could that be the one that's before the tribulation? I don't know. This again is a closer view of Ezekiel. It could be Armageddon. Again, Russia, Turkey, Libya, Ethiopia, Iran. We know for sure that group is going to attack Israel. We just don't know when. By the way, here's where our largest American base in Europe was, Air Force Base, in Turkey. But you know what? Turkey is aligning with Iran, away from the U.S., and with Iran against Israel. When was that? April 8th, 2023. Wow. Are we seeing the start of Ezekiel's map of the end of days? What's the U.S. doing? Why, we're giving the world's most expensive aircraft. That's an F-35. And Israel has more of them than any other nation other than the U.S., and they're trying everything they can, strapping extra tanks on them and doing all kinds of stuff because they don't want Iran to have an atomic bomb. Could it be that's what triggers what we see in Ezekiel? But let's go back to what Revelation 16 and 19 portray. Actually, Armageddon is a 4-part battle. It's the Antichrist coming from the west. Daniel 11 describes that. The kings of the south come, the kings of the north come, and the kings of the east come. Now, I thought this was an amazing headline. Look at this. March 19th, 2023, Vladimir and Mr. Xi, the premier of China. As Xi visits Russia, Putin sees his anti-U.S. world order taking shape. The kings of the east are starting to spend time with the kings of the north. I just think that's an amazing picture. So the lesson of Revelation is, what happens when people get what they really want? Well, Revelation 16 says, earth becomes a living hell. So we know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter whether Armageddon, if the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war is soon or in 7 years. What matters is, what were we left here to do? We were left here to go to those people sweating through our lives that are looking for everything they desire, finding emptiness, and tell them about Jesus Christ. And you'll be amazed. Many of them will just fall down before the Lord and cry out to him. You want something that strengthens your faith? Share the gospel and see Jesus do a miracle right in front of you. That's what leading people to Christ is. It's a miracle of God opening their heart, softening their hardness, breaking down their pride, and giving them a brand new heart. It's amazing.